I think that the interesting piece is when we talk about, the whole conference theme, the world of 3.0 and what our communities need for the future. So we understand even right now that what you're doing is, people don't get what we're doing. We're doing things that are different. Our educators are doing, in this panel, are doing things that are different. Amy, your company's been doing things. Now, it's normal for you.
Yes.
Because you've always been this way. What John's doing in education, it's normal for John. This is the way John's been operating for a long time. Howard's been out on the edge. Melody is a little younger. But she's been, she's a great example of a young person who's very socially motivated, and that comes, probably a lot from your background. And Catherine talking about advanced manufacturing, and this is really the panel on workforce development now, isn't it? The fullness of it. So based on what we've done, and our biggest thing is perception. I'd like you guys maybe to. Let's talk about how can we change that perception? How can we bring this to another level? How do we tie education and workforce development so that we stop looking at education as just this thing for our kids? I've been saying to people as we prepared for this, because I researched for everything, is that, barring some unforeseen accident, people in my family live for quite a while. And so I can at least say...
Up to 80, up to 92 is the longevity paradox right now.
I mean,
92.
My grandfather passed away at 97, and my grandmother just passed away this last year, well into her 80s. So, and I'm looking at another 40, 50 years. I'm probably never going to retire. I can't see you ever retiring, Bevan. I mean, what do you, maybe you won't get a paycheck the same way, but is anybody on this panel ever going to, can you see John Gamba stopping?
Not when you're on your passion. No. You never want to stop.
No, he's not. He's going to transition and do things differently. Yes.
I'm going to own the Philadelphia Eagles. That's my goal. But then I'll still be in business mode.
Right.
You mentioned how do you connect education and workforce development? I think that's a really great question. And I would go back to actually what Melody said. I think her comment really is right. It's relevancy. I can't tell you how many students I work with who raise their hand and say, Mr. Gamble, why am I learning about linear equations? What is the value of that? And so when we're teaching and we're learning and we're in this mode of college and career readiness, I'm a real big fan of the Cristo Rey. If anybody knows the Cristo Rey school in Chicago, they started in Chicago. And what they do is a private education, and the kids work on Monday. They go out in the real world. They're sponsored by a local community. The local community pays the school. The local corporate sponsor pays the school, and that money goes to pay for that child's education. So what do you have there? You have real world work. You have education. You have a corporate sponsor. And it's what I call the 21st century student being integrated with this 21st century learning community, which includes philanthropists, which includes sponsorship, which includes corporations, which includes foundations. So I go right back to relevancy. I think that's absolutely critical as when we're teaching our students math, science, English, but how does that impact real world experiences?
I think this sounds like a project for strategic doing. As I see Catherine.
I think it takes so many things, but you have to have companies who are willing to get engaged. Amy's company, I can say Nielsen, has really stepped up in the community. And then you have to have superintendents who are willing to listen to the business community. And then I think you have to have bridge builders in the community that are able to link the two, because it's very hard for businesses to get engaged in the education system. They don't know who to go to, where to go. The school districts in Florida are so large. Most states don't have school districts that are countywide. We're one of, I think, 3 states that do. And and it can be a real frustrating experience, and that's the same for the community colleges as well. I know that the Obama administration just rolled something out this week on workforce training, and especially in manufacturing, and they just granted millions and millions of dollars to different school districts, community colleges, and to some workforce projects. And I actually was in the White House a couple of weeks ago on the FEMA bill, but I happened to meet the gentleman who was helping to head this up, and he told me to send him our project, but it wasn't done. It's not done yet. We're an idea right now until we get our funding and get going. We're just an idea, so I wasn't willing to send it to him, and I think we might have missed it by just a few weeks. But I want to share an example of something a company that I visited in Bloom, Austria, and this is a mindset of a company that for me was an aha moment. So this company, Bloom, it's actually the company that started the apprenticeship model in Charlotte, which really has had a big effect in this country. We went to visit them, and it's a really, really large manufacturer, small community. And the president of the company told us that he did not have any cafeterias in his company. That he looked at his company as an economic driver for the area, and what he did was he made arrangements with local restaurants, and all his employees were encouraged to go out into the community and eat at those local restaurants, and then they would pay the bill at the restaurants. They turned in a voucher, and what a great mindset, right? So if everyone had this mindset that it's a big circle, we all have to work together for economic prosperity, I think we'd be a lot better off.
That reminds, yesterday when Tom Phillips was talking about the buses and that Legoland, for those of you who weren't here, in Polk County, they identified that the number one, they're doing public-private partnerships, and so Legoland actually pays a flat fee, and so many thousands of rides come through the public transit, and their top employee is actually somebody who rides the bus 5 days a week. And so that public-private partnership really coming together. I would say that what I would love to be able to do is the story. I mean, as educators, we know that stories change the way people think. Those stories, Catherine's story, Tom's story, I think that we have a story issue, and who is, I can't remember which one of the panelists, because I've talked to so many of you all in the last couple of days, but really that what is it, it's Ed. It's new narratives, isn't it? That strategic doing is creating new narratives, new stories, and I think that this is a great example for a new narrative, isn't it?
In networks and as we build collaborations, these narratives are really critical because think about how we use narratives in human history. We use narratives to convey what's valuable, to convey what's meaningful, but we also use narratives to give people conceptual maps about how to get to where they're going. And we also point people to promising futures with narratives. So this is why that whole ability to be able to think visually, tell stories is so critical. And one of the challenges I think we have in our group now is, okay, how do we take this from a one-time event during a year, and how do we move toward a much more narrative-driven storytelling, continuous connecting, set of engagements around these really exciting initiatives. I think that's really interesting.
And I think for me, my wish for a project would be that we took the circles and identified the different things that we looked at the overlaps and said, what's the number one thing that we could do first, and pick that narrative first and develop some really clear and concise stories. And then to coordinate, so then really to, like with the community initiatives this weekend with Bar Camp, the way we built hundreds of people is through volunteers. We've been working, we started a project last year, and John was part of that. And what we did is we brought together developers and designers. We got about, I don't know where we are on the spectrum now, somewhere between $90,000, maybe $120,000 worth of value that's been given to this project. We got .NET Nuke, who's the, to donate hosting for 2 years. They're the largest open source platform in the world. And what we did is we divided the project up into segments, and we had people volunteer. And so we had to have somebody who managed the project because it was across organizations. But to me, I think that, you guys, we have some really great stories here that if we could tie these together, that sounds like a project to be kind of spearheaded by like a regional organization as a leader, somebody who steps up. Okay, so no, you see, look at you. Is everybody? Where's Stuart? Where's John? Let's look. What does a partnership do? We are doing. Yes,
Ed's
Ed.
volunteering.
Well, one of the things comes out. One is that we'd be really interested in participating in any kind of work here. But one of the things that really strikes me as I'm listening to all these panels, it's really about learning innovation. It's not about education training. It's learning innovation. That's what's happening. I mean, going back to what Jeff was talking about, it's lifelong learning. It's learning innovation. It's new ways of learning. No region that I know of has staked that out yet as an opportunity. And it seems to me that this region is right to do that. But it's going to have to happen through collaboration on a much faster cycle, where you can take each one of your initiatives and scale it faster, right? That's part of the challenge, is how do we scale these initiatives faster?
So I see two things in that, and I really, when I was saying that to you, Stuart, is when you work with multiple organizations, it's nice to have somebody who's well established as a leader. When we started this project with the partnership, we already knew we were going to do this, and I think one of our conversations in the last couple of weeks is as long as you don't care who gets the credit, you can do incredible things. And so we need an organization that is a regional leader. That we can help center around the same reason that when Ed brings strategic doing someplace, he usually works with a university because it gives him some critical mass to work off of. But I think that, John, that this is a big thing that you've been talking about, and although you're not in the Tampa Bay region, you've been talking about this, and now I think do you have maybe some more resources to put behind some of the stuff you want to do?
Yes, so this is a real big deal. I do half of my work in Washington, D.C., and they're absolutely moving the needle on this issue in the District of Columbia in terms of ed reform and learning outcomes and blended learning and the whole world of education reform and innovative learning. It's 87,000 students, 77,000 students, who cares? Tampa to Collier, maybe even if over to Orange County, when we start talking about economic development and everybody down here talks about real estate, med tech, older generations, I say no 1,000 times no. We sold our company to Blackboard for $182 million, and Collier and Sarasota were later stage closes for our company. If we could have had an education technology incubation here with the school districts of this size, Sarasota, Hillsborough, Pinellas, and the resources behind them, and make this an ed tech center of excellence, that is amazing. Then you turn around and you say, the wealth down here, back to the Sanibel Island, these are $800 million. The planks from Under Armour, they founded under billionaires, they fund, and what do? They put their money up in Baltimore, where they're from, because they don't have this movement, and I go back to capacity and impact. Kevin Plank, I went to high school with him, says, I'd give $15 million to the Sanibel C School for citizen science, but they better know how to spend it, and they don't know how? I'll give my $100 million gift to Newark City schools like Zuckerberg did. So capacity and impact, if you can really model it around that and have champions, and And I definitely agree with story-based learning and narratives. Absolutely. You know, I think about, you know, Melody, that the story of, you know, me stories and you know, really personifying this. I'd love to, you know, hear more about, you know, the actual student who learned coding and then became an executive, a woman, Hispanic, who made an impact. That would be powerful.
So so I want you to talk. Stan is looking for. So I was texting to say, can you put something up for me? I wasn't on a phone call. He's looking. Yeah, she's on the panel texting. She can't even put her phone down. So he's going to pull up. This actually is a student vision, and this is really what happened for us and why you're here and why, although we talked about all these other things, you see what's in the very center of this. When we started our Bar Camp Community Initiative, it started around technology and cool business, and then investors came because investors show up where cool innovation is happening. But we were always passionate about education. You know, our first events were at Suncoast Polytechnical High School. You know, Melody, we drug her down here and said, you need to come be a part of the Giving Partner Challenge because TechStart, they have footage here in this area, but they don't have, they cover this area, but they don't really have those connections here. So everything centers around education. And so that's why this has been so passionate for us. So we looked at this as the fabric of life. And you see, what's interesting is, so John, you're in Southwest Florida. We're all in different places. And so each one of us, yesterday we had this conversation about microclimates, placemaking. Each one of us lives in a place that's different. Amy said it, you know, what your business is down in Venice is different than here because you have different resources. It grows a little differently. So with all those things considered in education here in the center, I'd like to ask Commissioner Sharpe, Mark Sharpe, to begin to think about, you know, because we've asked him to bring this together with the innovation in economic development, because this is the fabric that he's been looking at. He's going to tell a little bit of his story, because his is about economic development and tying it together with what we're doing. And this is because, John, your piece is you're investing in companies. We're not just talking about changing paradigms. We're talking about putting money behind it, growing businesses, changing models. And if we can put impact to that, then people will do different things. So, Melody, go ahead. The picture's up there. And yeah, Commissioner Sharpe will be ready to join us in a little bit.
Okay, I think a lot of it is about changing perspectives too. On day one of Code Club, all my students came in and two little boys came up to me and go, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Hi, I'm Melody, I'm your Code Club teacher." He goes, "Really?" And I was like, "Yes, what were you expecting?" He was like, "I was expecting a male teacher." It's like he looked up at me and was like, "I did not sign up for online shopping or jewelry making or something like that." But it's all about changing their perspective and showing them that computer science isn't just sitting behind a desk, it's working in teams. And education isn't about just learning out of a textbook, it's about experiential learning and combining coding with science and making them do their Newton project through their Scratch program and showing it an animation through a topic that they're learning in math class or in history. So all of that kind of stuff. I really think it's about changing perspectives and using your resources and showing how you can make a bigger impact.
So I'm actually going to leave the panel. I'm going to ask Commissioner Sharpe to come up here and use my microphone just actually, yes, because you guys are sharing one between the three of you. And so he does sound bites all the time. So what I want you to share, and then I'm going to steal a microphone and we'll just kind of work and take some questions, is because I want you to share why you have the ownership and responsibility in that you've decided to take in the ecosystem. And when we talk about the EDI2 grants that you're doing, they kind of tie into this part over here, don't they, about lifelong learners and education. And so it's even a better segue than I could imagine. So I'm going to let you come up and use this mic. And for the gentleman who wanted to know about economic development, this is going to tie it all together. I really, go ahead. You can have my chair, and so I'll just sit here. Tell them a little bit about what you shared with me about what you discovered in Tampa and how you moved that forward, because that's part of this narrative, and they're the other part of your story. And I love the fact that he wore his shirt, because that was I was at that event speaking. That's a bar camp and code camp. Two different types of education coming together. It was at USF, great event. And so I think it's a part of the beginning of his story. Go ahead.
It was a great event. First off, it's an honor to be here. John promised that if I kept it under an hour, he wouldn't throw a shoe at me. I promise I'll keep it much, much shorter. I started my day at a coffee shop where I usually go on Fridays. It's Buddy Brew on Kennedy and Albany. I started going there years ago when it first opened. It was a small startup, but it was a coffee startup. And in fact, I walked in by accident. Nobody was in there. It was a roaster and a guy behind a laptop, and I thought maybe it was a business. And I talked to the guy, and he said, no, it's a startup coffee shop. We roast beans. And I said, well, do you mind if I have the meetings here? I'm running for re-election. I need a spot where we can meet. It's convenient. Nobody seems to be in here. It might work. So he gladly said sure. And we had these Friday meetings in which we would talk politics. And I got Mark Dominic from the Bucks to come and Joe Lapana from the airport and others. But what I found was, as we were having the conversations, people really wanted to talk about tech startups, the startup community, and that was what generated a lot of interest and excitement. In politics, even though I was in it, I kind of felt like my wife was boring. She thought that she doesn't like politics much. But talking tech startups, talking about what's changing the world, when you get into a conversation about what Facebook is doing or Google, some of the really cool companies that everybody wants to seem to go work for, that generates a lot of excitement. And so we saw that the conversation was shifting, and it was getting away from politics, and it was heading towards startups. And as we had those conversations, what I was hearing was, look, the economic development folks at the county are spending all their time trying to get large corporate companies to come and relocate in our city. Why don't you do something to help the tech startups that are here who feel like they have to go to Silicon Valley or, you know, Boston or Atlanta, even maybe Jacksonville, wherever, Austin, Boulder. Why don't we do something to help them here? Let's grow our own community of tech startup companies. The companies that Kaufman says are really generating all the net new job creation. Most large companies create jobs by acquiring other companies, but job creation comes from the small guys. So we shifted our focus. I got away from politics, started talking about startups, invited venture capitalists to come, invited folks from the government to come. I've invited young people. We talk about, you know, young of mind and spirit and age, but a lot of the folks that we are talking about are technically, they're millennials. They're young. They're the ones that understand all this tech. I got a book that I just purchased from some kid who wrote it out of Harvard University. It's How to Talk Tech. And I'm like on my second reading, and I'm still trying to understand it. I can't program my, you know, TV thing, and I call it a TV thing. My kids can, and I teach a class at USF where the kids who I'm teaching are all honors students, are brilliant. We had a class yesterday in which we talked about ethics, and I said, can you come up with an application that will teach people to trust their government or want to be more involved in their government? And they're like, yeah. And within 30 minutes, and I was taking videos of it, they had an app that looked like that little Flappy Bird. Have you ever seen Flappy Bird, the game? The one where the kid made $50,000 a day? He's from Vietnamese, 26-year-old kid. If you want to get someone's interest, tell them you can make $50,000 a day on an app.
Wow.
You got my attention. I mean, I'm like Bloomberg. He's like going to learn how to code. Now I know why he wants to learn how to code, because good gosh, you can make money off of it. But coding's hard. Well, I mean, when you really dig into it, they say it's not, it is. And you've got to be smart. I mean, to really be good, to be the talent that the companies that are in San Francisco and are not going to come here unless we've really got the talent. I mean, we want them to come here. I want them to come here, but to come here, they're going to have to see real talent. I mean, they're debating about whether they move from San Francisco to Silicon Valley. Where's the talent? And we're waving our arms and saying, come to Tampa. That's great. We got to show it. We got to show them the talent. We got to show them the companies and businesses. So what we've done at the county, we created a program about a year ago called EDI2, Economic Development Innovation Initiative. And really what it is, it's a way to give out money. And that gets people's attention. Because one thing I've noticed is the startup community, the tech community, they tend to be like cats. They fight a lot, they run all over, you can't organize them. If you want to try to organize them, you're making a huge mistake, I think, because they're very smart, and and part of why they're so good is that they're not going to be following the rubric set by government. They're going to do their own thing. And government doesn't like that, so they don't want to give those guys the money. They want to give old industry the money. Well, the tech startup guys are going to be running over the old industry. And so there's this dichotomy, because you go to old industry to say, we want your money because we want to be able to support this community that's going to take your place. And that's something that's difficult for them. And some communities have figured out how to do it. Large companies that have innovation centers like Nielsen, where they hire people who are really smart to come in and tell them how to continue to do what you do so someone else doesn't come in and figure out another way to get the information, or tells people, look, no one watches TV anymore. I bought 5 TVs, put them in my house, and now I realize my kids don't watch TV. I'm the one watching it, and I don't know how to work the clicker. But I mean, they're all like, you know, watching their laptop. I was watching, in fact, I have to admit it, during lunch, during that fabulous presentation, I was watching the Masters on my app that I just downloaded while I was sitting there. You know, the Masters app. And, you know, I'm not, Mickelson's still far out, so I shut it off to watch this. But, you know, there's this dramatic transformation taking place. Some communities have figured out how to embrace it. Our EDI2 is a $2 million program where we hand out small grants to not companies, because we're not picking winners or losers. And I was originally going to try to put money towards an incubator or an accelerator, and we were told, don't do that. Support the community. Support bar camp. I went to bar camp. It was like going to a StarCraft convention. I got to my first bar camp. There are all these people who look different and spoke a language I didn't understand 2 years ago. They're very tech-oriented. Have you ever been to a bar camp? Okay, yeah, because Starkey, you're looking at me like I was being insulting. Who's been to a bar camp of you that, okay, this community, okay, you guys, well, you're Mr. Bar Camp, you're Sarasota Bar Camp. I went there, I wore my Cigar City beer shirt because I thought it was gonna be real cool, like funny, like is this a bar camp? Where's the beer? No one thought it was funny at all. But the next time I went there, I had given them some money. So they were I got a better speaking, I spoke at the beginning of the program, not the end. So I got to give you guys some money next time. But I mean, but we were giving out money to these, see, when you let me speak, I'll say what I want to say. We gave money, good. We gave money to Bar Camp, Code Camp, Health Camp. We were the only government to give money to startup bus that went to South by Southwest. In fact, Guy Kawasaki, who's like the, you know who Guy is, but Guy is like the guru of tech, worked for Apple, was like stunned that Hillsborough County was the only government in the country that they could come up with that had funded a startup bus. And that's because our program, which is fairly innovative, is unique. Even Brad Feld, who's got the book Startup Community, and in fact, I went to go meet Brad. I accepted a speaking engagement in Denver. I will not tell the organizers why. The reason I went was not because I wanted to speak at this event, but because I wanted to go meet Brad Feld, who was in Boulder. So I went and got to meet Brad and talked about how do you build an ecosystem for startups? How do you build a Boulder where you have the highest density of startups per capita in the nation? And I said, what did the government do to help you here in Boulder? And that's what he laughed and said, they're crazy. The government here is more interested in the Kyoto Accords. They're not doing anything relevant. He said, so really, government didn't help, but they did a couple of things. They did plant trees, and they built parks and trails. And the people who work in these industries like trees and trails and parks. And so we I think, are much further ahead. We've got an economic development corporation under Rick Homans that is investing in MetaFuture, and we're going to have a huge conference this year where we're going to talk about how we're going to be innovative in healthcare. The partnership has reoriented itself and is now focusing on startups in the tech community and partnering with the Tampa Bay Tech Forum and others, and really giving oxygen to a community that is growing in Tampa Bay. The county has got this money in EDI2. We're going to shut down. I hope I'm not, it hasn't been approved yet by the board or county administrator, but we're going to be adjusting our small business development center and taking it away from an old industrial park where nobody wants to go, you know, and we're going to call it something a little different, and it's going to be more oriented towards assisting tech startup companies, which I think is going to be fabulous. And we're going to get mentors who understand tech startup. There's a lot of accelerators out there and incubators, and they've got well-meaning mentors. But what I hear is you got to get mentors who understand this community, and it does speak a different language. So if you get a mentor in here who knows business the way it was 10, 20 years, they're not much help. You're going to have to find the very busy guy or gal who's starting up a company in the tech world, and then bring them in and have them mentor. And then the college programs, and I'm at the colleges all the time, but I mean, I was at the university's hackathon. I said, how many of you taking courses in computer science here at the university? I expected every hand to go up. Most of the hands didn't go up. I'm like, well, you're from the University of South Florida, and you're studying, and you're computer experts. Where'd you learn it? They said, on our own. They learned it on their own. So whatever you can do to help teach computer science to kids in our schools, I think would be fabulous. We need to teach them how to code C++ and Ruby on Rails and all those things. We need to figure out a way to get that into the classroom so kids can code at a lower level and then into college, and so that we've got a talent pool that the companies will want. I don't know if I answered anything that you wanted, but that was my best at it.
Now, Ed, is that the beginning of a great narrative? So we were really excited because, so for those of you who haven't been to bar camp, you know, this is our 8th bar camp starting tomorrow. So we actually leave this event and go stuff folders and pick up T-shirts and banners and stuff for tomorrow. And so if you haven't been to a bar camp is really, that's just a name, and it's interesting how it got it, but a bar camp is really about community. And what we share about community is that community is a place where people know one another. You know, when you go out of town, somebody takes care of your dog. You call your neighbor and they pick your kid up from school if you can't make it. And so our goal in building a community was to build a place where people acted like they belonged to a community, even though they didn't live on the same street. And so that's what bar camp is. Typically, it's a one-day thing someplace else. Look at Stan's putting up our... what we noticed, like for everybody else here, is the world is changing. And so we had more and more entrepreneurs coming to our bar camps because they were looking for resources. And we had been serving people like the Tampa Bay Inventors Council for years. They had been coming to our events. And so last year, we actually had our event at the new Manatee Technical Institute, which is the #1 technical institute in the country. Very cool. And it's a gorgeous facility. And our 350, almost 400 people absolutely disappeared. The facility was so big. And we're like, hey, so you know these makers and inventors that we have? What if we put some tables in and some power cords? That'd be really cool, and we'll plug them in and we'll have them bring their cool stuff, right? You know, some quadcopters, and we've got some FIRST robotics teams coming. And so, did you go to the Makers Con last weekend? There was a big Makers Fair at the fairground in Tampa. Yeah.
It was a hacker event. I went to a hacker event.
Yeah, so we didn't go because we were getting ready for our event. But next year, Terry Willingham, who heads that up and heads up the FIRST teams, is going to be doing the Makers event in conjunction with our bar camp, which is going to be following directly this leadership conference. Because imagine if we bring government and we bring educators and we bring the makers and inventors together and we bring the business people and we bring the investors and we put them in one place. There's this term called collision. You put them in one place. You create this primordial-like soup, and what will happen? And the reason we really loved what Mark is doing is because if you're a community person and do the work that we do, this is brutal. It's brutal. What we've done for 6 years to do what we've done in bar camp, we don't get paid to do that. And so finally somebody said, wow, we recognize that even though you don't get paid to do this, that your contribution is valuable. And that is social entrepreneurship 3.0. It's on the other edge. You know, and yes, does it grow your business? Absolutely. But we're gonna, you know, we have I think there's a slide on there that I put that said, you know, save the date. You know, what he's saying is like, I need you guys to help us get there. Because if you guys can't help us do this, I mean, it all works together. And we want you to come back. We're going to be doing some other things between now and next year, because you can't create a community and do the types of stuff we need to do on a once-a-year activity. And Ed will, I mean, he's been here going, oh my gosh, we need to do this. We need, you know, because he knows what it takes to keep a movement going forward. But I'd really love to see these things that we're talking about, to take over this next year. What could we do if we could define these narratives and we could connect to a volunteer community and we could put some money behind it? And we said 30-30 every month for the next 12 months. Could we make a really big difference? Could John help? Could John have that impact, the impact in the metrics? You know, what's going to happen? Could he help bring that into more places and help some of his friends that would like to invest, put that some good places? What Melody's doing, don't you think that that's a great thing to invest in? And she has an organization like the Tampa Bay Technology Forum behind her. So she may be the only one in that department, but she has access to incredible resources. I mean, am I the only one that sees that we could do this between now and next year? Yes, go ahead, John.
I think to really echo what you're saying, just real raw facts, like this is serious. 2012, $1.2 billion invested in ed tech. 2013, $1.4 billion in ed tech. First quarter of 2014, $500 million in ed tech. It's going to crush 2012 and 2013 for a whole lot of reasons. But one of the #1 reasons why this region is so powerful, if you take Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough alone, that's 300,000 students and probably $4 billion in operating budgets. That's more than that. It might be more, 4.5 billion. If you asked any ed tech company from Silicon Valley to New York to Washington, D.C., how would you like to have access to that set of school districts? So you want an action item? Get those 3 superintendents in a room and say, the first time my technology department says, not invented here, we're not going to let that ed tech company in here, fire them. The superintendents need to say, once a quarter, our district is open, and any ed tech company who wants to come in and present their wares on how they're going to impact learning is invited here. You're going to have a tsunami of talent coming into this region. Because if I would have had access to Sarasota County Schools, Pinellas, Hillsborough early on as I was building my company, I got them later because I had to prove the value first. But if you have a culture of embracing risk, embracing entrepreneurship, embracing ingenuity and innovation, and then you have the ed tech entrepreneurs come in and say, and the superintendent say, here's my condition. My technology groups will embrace you, but you have to do it with my students. My students, Melody students, have to help you build it because they are the ones who are going to consume what you're building. Mm-hmm. That little model is going to work.
That's my urging. And don't wait for another year. Go.
Here's the other crazy thing. Here's the thing that really baffles me. Well, you've got 3 superintendents in 3 districts worth $4 to $5 billion. Right. You've got philanthropists in this area that are worth billions of dollars because this is where you come to retire. Right. You've got incredible weather. You've got an appetite for trees and parks and trails and a fitness community from Tampa to Collier. I'm an athlete, I'm a triathlete, that would love this area. Now here's the one that really gets me. You know what? You don't really have what all of these communities, Bradfeld and Boulder, have, which is a university community. Bullshit. UCF is the biggest university in the country now. USF is incredible. I'm sorry the language, Mike, but I get really impassioned by this that says, so you have weather, you have budget,
passion there.
You have students, and you have a university community that has some ed tech, some incubator stuff going on. That's the recipe for creating an ecosystem of entrepreneurial.
But here's the thing, it won't happen like with all the other things. It's whoever, I see this like a giant scrum, and I love being in scrums, football, whatever, rugby. When you're in there and you're hitting and someone's gonna have to pick up the ball and run with it.
That's right.
Everyone's waiting for someone else to run with the ball, and I love conferences, we're having conferences and meetings. You gotta go do it. You just gotta get out there and get it done. And so, and you got the legislature getting ready to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into what you're just talking about, and you don't have there's no curriculum. The teachers aren't trained to do it. I mean, there's so much opportunity in that field. Senator Legg's office has talked about this. So if you could own it and you could figure out a way to make it all happen.
30-30. So I would say, when we say, what are we going to do this? I don't think that we start next year. I think we set a goal to make this happen. And when we come back next year, the convention center, we're planning on 1,000 people. We can't do this on our own. I know in bringing a vision to fruition that this is year 2, and we asked for thought leaders. That's what we got. What can we do between now and there to access this? And this is what Ed's talking about. I mean, this next year, this should be full, and we should have stuff under our belt. And are we doing it? I have to tell you, getting ready for this conference was brutal, but you're here and we're doing it. So let's seize the opportunity and not be one of those groups that just talks about it and said, oh, you remember when?